India is the largest democracy in the world because of its size and population. Not many know that certain forms of democracy existed in ancient India. Prime Minister called India as the mother of democracy. Since then, the term has become popular. He referred to existence of republics during the Buddhist era and over 1,000-year-old inscriptions found in a temple in Tamil Nadu. To give an academic framework to the term India being the mother of democracy, country's premier research body, Indian Council of Historical Research, came out with a voluminous book. It contains 30 essays by historians on presence of various forms of democracy in ancient India. We spoke to Professor Raghuvendra Tanwar, an eminent history scholar and chairperson of ICHR. The notion of India being the mother of democracy gained currency after Prime Minister Narendra Modi began speaking about it. Is there sufficient historical and archaeological evidence to back it?
You see, the term mother of democracy, which you are saying has just recently come into public domain, is in fact a technical term in the sense it has been there around for a long time. What the Honorable Prime Minister has drawn attention to is an approach to decolonize the process of the historical narrative that has prevailed in this country. I'll just to give you an example. The British were in India for just about 200 years. Okay, now for a country like India, which we are with a history going back thousands and thousands of years, 200 years should have been inconsequential. But this did not happen. What the British did was that they delinked us from our legacies of which we had actually been proud. For example, our spiritual legacies, our cultural legacies. Now, the concept of India being a mother of democracy, not in the literal sense, but in the broader pictures, which I'll explain to you just down the line, is that there are so many thought processes that have been prevailing here on which we really need to be proud of. It was basically the idea is to have a decolonized approach to understanding issues here.
As you said, this is not a recent construct. Historians refer to it at the turn of 20th century, but it seems we lost it along the way.
You see, this again is one of the big ironies of Indian history writing. Now, I've been teaching since 1977, and I remember that the books that I read in, say, 75 or 76 to take history as a profession by choice were, say, R.C. Majumdar, just for an example, were Jadunath Sarkar, were D.B. Sen, Radha Kumar Mukherjee, and so on. So you have this 11 volumes of R.C. Majumdar's The History and Culture of the Indian People being a kind of very profoundly important historical narrative based on solid sources and studied across the board. And gradually, as you move down, you find that these volumes have disappeared completely, and you have a new set of writings. Now, when you look at the 20th century history or the history of the freedom movement, again, you have two streams here. You have one stream which has been wiped out, and the other stream which has been propagated. So, the concept that the freedom movement was more a political movement was a false narrative in the sense, I mean, this is how I feel. Ideally, the freedom movement was, you could say, it was greatly inspired by cultural legacies, greatly inspired by spiritual legacies. Look at the Bande Mataram, for example. Look at Bankim Chandra when he develops the concept of mother, the nation being a mother. How Lala Lajpat Rai picks it up, how Tilak picks it up, how Savarkar picks it up, how Aurobindo picks it up. Aurobindo talks of this nation being a unique civilization. He does not talk of it of India being in political terms. He talks of it in evolutionary civilization. And that is where this concept of mother of democracy comes in. You have a lot of ideas emerging, not necessarily democracy in the context of today's, in narratives, but in a broader sense. So you have this one concept of history being downscaled, understated, and you have political history, economic history being pushed into center stage, and the things of which India is basically an evolutionary civilization. I cannot imagine India without context of spiritualism. Nothing in our lives is non-spiritual. Tell me one example which is important in our life in which we have not involved religion. So that is one issue here.
The modern sense of democracy as a concept came from the Greeks and the Romans. Was our systems as developed as theirs?
Now, this has to be understood in a very larger perspective. You see, when you talk in time frames, when we go to the Vedic literature, for example, you have Sabha and Samitis. Panani is talking of Parishad Bala, Parishads. And, the king is a Parishad Bala. Now, these terms are predating the Greeks and the Romans by at least 1,000 years. Okay. Justice Rama Joyce, in the constitutional and legal history of India, explains the concept of dharma as discussed in the Rig Veds. He says, now the concept of dharma and kingship are interdependent, like two sides of the same coin. You cannot be a king until you are. And what is dharma? When you understand, not in the context of dharma, religion, it is a broader concept of, he talks of good for all, he talks of fairness, he talks of being impartial, he talks of empathy, he talks of compassion. Now, these are ideas that we are talking of at least 1,000 years before the Greeks and the Romans have come. And what is democracy? I mean, what is the sense of democracy is what? It means the good for all. Good for all, right? So when you talk of the good for all, we are talking of the good for all 1,000 years before the Greeks and the Romans were doing it. The critics of our approach say that, I've read, even our own scholars have been writing, where is democracy in India? But when you understand the essence of democracy, inclusiveness, Kallan talks of a particular people were looking for a king. So how should the king be? A king should be dispassionate. Rajtarangi refers to a king should be dispassionate. A king should be fair. A king should not take sides. The oath of a king. In the Vedic period, the king's oath, he should be committed to doing good for all. He should be committed to looking after the poor. He should be committed, the whole inclusive. See, essentially, when you talk of democracy, you're talking of inclusiveness. We are talking of inclusiveness much, much before the Greeks and the Romans. And, somebody gets me very angry also sometimes. The manner in which you try to understate the significance of our past process of thought. We are the people who have told the world good and wrong. This is right, this is wrong. This is good, this is not good. Okay. We are the people who have told the world that you do not escape your actions. Whatever action you do, at some stage, look at it in the broader sense. This is precisely what democracy should be meaning. That you cannot escape the course of your action. Today you vote a person out. Those days it was nature that took care of you, but the essence is there. And Justice Rama Joyce has beautifully explained this whole concept. And drawn from the Vedic sources. Countless. You can go on and on. The Upanishads, you can cite countless sources.
The Indian Council of Historical Research came out with a book, India, the Mother of Democracy. It covers a lot of ground.
We at the ICHR, one of the key emphasis that we are trying to lay on is that I'm not sort of understating the contribution of the past. ICHR has been doing it has had excellent council members, excellent scholars, excellent publications. I'm not commenting on that. But the fact is, we felt that there is part of history writing that has not received its due place. Okay. The one part of it was in the sense that the concept of mother of democracy, for example, there are different aspects, we need to be proud of what we have been living, we've drawn out, I can give you countless examples of how this country has evolved, Aurobindo says we are an evolutionary civilization. So likewise, when you talk of the idea of the concept of the volume of mother of democracy, the idea emerges on, we are talking of culture, we are talking of cultural rejuvenation, we are talking of spiritual rejuvenation, and there's nothing wrong in it. So this is how the idea, let the world know. See, basically, the idea of the mother of democracy was not, it was less political, more cultural, more spiritual, more civilizational, let me put it like this. The idea was not to tell the world that we are actually an evolved democracy per se. We have our problems, particularly with poverty. But here we are talking of democracy in a very broad sense. The common Indian cannot be anything but, he can be anything, but he will definitely be a democratic at heart, And this has come down to us from ages. I'm born in a village. I know how the system works. And I sometimes am shocked when people say that India is losing its democratic stands or its democratic footing. This is the last thing that will ever happen to this country. There's no way that we can. So the idea was the message, as you said, was to tell the world that we are actually at heart and innately democratic. The world, you see, democracy for the others in Europe, for example, when you go to Europe, I mean, you see little republic, they have they're created by some nation comes out of a war, some is drawn, some political thing, small nations, and they talk of democracy. People who've not had democracy for just 200 years before that, they are passing judgment on us. And here is a country which we are talking, I mean, even if you go to the Vedic period, say around 3,500, say at least 3,000 years ago, अगर 1500, 1500 BC भी अगर मानकर चलें, even then we are 3,500 years old. And we have references to sabas and samatis and so on in these texts. That is, I thought, I mean, they send this message in a compact form. The other point that you raised was that why has the volume covered so many different... the idea was in one volume. So we've tried to run through the whole period, right down to the making of the Constitution, so that in one single volume you get an understanding of the broad overall picture. It should have been in more volumes, but the idea was let's start with one volume. So we are updating that volume now. We are coming up with an illustrated volume. We're adding more photographs to it. You've got a lot of good photographs.
How do you react to the charge that there is an attempt to rewrite history books?
On this, Pratul, I can assure you of one thing. The ICHR is not rewriting anything. As chairman of the ICHR, one who has been briefed and assigned the task of guiding research through our body, through our council, I can assure you categorically that there is no concept, there is no process, there is no project of rewriting anything. All right, we fully accept what has been written. All we are doing is trying to fill the gaps. As I said, we need to re-emphasize, we need to draw attention back to issues that have been oversighted. A school of history writing has focused on the economic perspective. For them, the entire perspective is either political or economic. All right. So there is a school of history writers who feels that spiritualism and culturalism should also be. India is unique. As I said repeatedly, I've used this word. We've evolved as a civilization. So we are an evolutionary civilization. We need to tell the world that we are different. We have not evolved from the process through much of which the rest of the world has evolved.
In the ICHR book, you have included examples from the Northeast, South India, and of Six Gurus, and even Khaps in Haryana to showcase democratic traditions. How did you decide on them?
When you look at India in the broad picture of India, we are a hugely diverse country, a diversity that has been integrated over thousands of years. We may be speaking different languages, we may be wearing different clothes, eating different foods, having different, attire and so on. But have you ever felt out of place? Say you go to Tamil. I was in Tamil Nadu recently. Okay. When you go from Delhi to Tamil Nadu or someone from Tamil Nadu comes to Delhi, I mean, do you ever feel that you're out of place? This will not happen because there is an innate bonding in this country, whether it is the Northeast, whether it is Tamil Nadu. Imagine the Shankaracharya walking from Kerala 1200 years ago and walking and, Bhiksha Mang ke, he's seeking food and walking barefoot and reaching Kashmir. And we are a country which has being governed by sages and saints. Consensus building, let me add here, consensus building has been an integral part of our culture. Right. Our rishis have talked about it. Our Vedic texts have talked about it. So coming to your point of the diversity in the essays chosen for this volume, you see, basically the idea was to say that all our cultures, whether it is the South, whether it is our tribal brethren in the Northeast, all of them have had some concept of democracy. We refer to the Gurus, the Sikh historiography made. They are one of the most profoundly democratic traditions. I asked Dr. Mahendra Singh, the Bhai Veer Singh Chair, a very profound scholar, very eminent scholar. He did a very good paper on that. He talks of Guru Nanak Dev, So you have this. The idea was to tell the world that we are, in spite of all our diversity, we are a country that has valued these traditions through ages. That is why the diversity of content in this volume.
There has been much debate on the inclusion of Khaps as democratic institution when even courts have spoken out against them.
The issue actually, what happens is that where we go dramatically wrong,
Right.
I'll give you I'll give you an example before I answer this question of yours. In Haryana, we are having a problem these days. The Rajput community and the Gujar community are saying that Mir Bhoj was a Gujar, Mir Bhoj was a Rajput.
Right.
So, by virtue of the position I hold, or perhaps by virtue of my historical understanding, I've been asked by several people in the government as well, what is your take on it? See, for me, it becomes very difficult to explain that the concept of Rajput and Gujar did not exist in the 9th century AD. This is not how society was divided.
Okay.
If at all, it was very mild, peripheral, So now what we do, where we go seriously wrong is when we try to prefix present connotations, present understanding into the past. History, the first lesson that any good teacher will teach in history is that period is all important, What are you talking about? Something which was normal in the 15th and 16th century would appear dramatically oppressive today. Because today you have times have changed, societies have changed, issues have changed. So coming to the Khap is a very complex body. And now I belong to Haryana and I know the Khap system very well. So when the issue came up whether we needed an article on the Khaps, I remember a meeting of very senior historians. We are about 15-20 people. And I raised the issue. I said, how can you talk about democracy without referring to Khaps? All 50% or 60% of those present reacted the manner in which you have reacted. That Khaps are undemocratic, Khaps are, When you look at the Khaps today, I would not like to comment on that. I'm not in a position, nor am I, I wouldn't like to raise ruffle feathers. But when the period of which we are talking, the Khap was a body in which it played a very important role. You see, Haryana is a very unique kind. It's a small state, but we have villages that are 1,000 years old. Since we lay on the route of the invasions, see, Haryana is uniquely situated, just like Punjab, for example. Unlike Punjab, in Haryana, you have villages which have survived over 1,000 years. My own village is at least 1,000 years old. So you have these villages being destroyed. You have again, as the armies would come in, they would run away, go into the jungles. And they would come back and settle the village. But they would also resist. So the most resistance suffered by the invaders was in this area of what is today's Haryana. So in Haryana's villages, which have a long history, one of our peasant leaders, Chotu Ram, you must be familiar with the name, a very renowned leader. So he once wrote in an essay in which he says that if someone who was born in Sampla, he belonged to a village called Sampla near Rohtak, he says if someone born in Sampla 500 years ago was to take rebirth and he was able to remember his village, he would realize nothing had changed in that village, even after 500 years.
Right.
So this tradition of Khaps, the Khap is today, as I said, today there are countless other issues, the sociological issues, economic issues, the youth wanting to be in the limelight, the youth wanting to become leaders very quickly, wanting a political standing. But at one particular time in our history, this was not the case. The Khap was playing a social role. The Khap was playing the social, today you have marriages have become a serious issue. But this was basically a quasi-judicial kind of system in which they took judgments, they avoided the police. Villages took pride in the fact that the police has never entered our village. As I was telling you, that there are villages that used to take pride. We have not allowed the police to enter our villages. We have not allowed a case to be filed from this village. So the Khap was playing this role.
Right.
Of course, this is a comment, say, 700-800 years ago. Then the Khaps, you see, these were very difficult times. It's very important to understand the role of the Khaps in a context in which we are having regular invasions. Conversions are being undertaken at a huge scale. There is a body of people, there is an organizational setup which is resisting this, which is protecting its people, protecting its women, protecting its social fabric. So this is how it works.
There are fears that democracy in India is in decline.
This angers me a lot, honestly. I really sometimes I don't listen much to debates on TV and all, but I do my reading. I gather my news from newspapers and magazines. But when I do and when I listen to it, sometimes it is shocking. If there is anything that is safe in this country, anything, it is democracy. I have no qualms about saying it. I have no hesitation in saying this. Democracy has deep roots. You cannot, you see, I mean, the common person, go to the village, I mean, they cannot even imagine being denied their right to vote. It is unthinkable. It is a complete Western perception. We have our problems, we have our population problems, we have our poverty problems, we have our unemployment. See, these are not things that you resolve by, but democracy is certainly not, I mean, there is no question of it being under threat. And that's how I look at it.